Vanessa Bryant, spouse of the late Kobe Bryant, and Chris Chester were awarded damages by a California federal jury yesterday in a case of invasion of privacy against LA County. Hi, I'm Katie Charleston of Katie Charleston Law. Let's take a look at this action. This was an action for invasion of privacy, which is a tort in California, a tort that can be brought under four different theories. One is public disclosure of private facts, as it looks like was done here. Two would be intrusion into private matters. Three would be portraying a person in a false or misleading light. And lastly, misappropriation of a person's name or likeness. Here it appears that Vanessa Bryant and Chris Chester brought an action against the LA County for the police officers and fire department or firemen sharing private images of the remains of Kobe Bryant and the other individuals that were killed in a crash over a year ago. Now, to prevail in this type of claim, there are certain elements that would need to be met by the plaintiff pursuing the action. One being that the defendants publicized private information concerning the plaintiff, or here the plaintiff's family. Two, that a reasonable person would consider the public or publicity highly offensive, that the officers knew or had a reckless disregard for knowledge of the offensiveness of the publicity, that the private information was not of legitimate public concern, that the plaintiff, or in this case the plaintiff's family, was harmed, and that the defendant's conduct was a substantial factor in causing that harm. Now here we have a case where Kobe Bryant and 7 individuals on a helicopter died in that crash, and the police officers and firemen that were involved in the investigation took some photos of the remains and then are alleged to have shared them throughout their departments, including during playing video games. There's also allegations that these gruesome pictures of the remains were shared publicly with people outside the agency. So these are private pictures of individuals taken during this tragedy, and they were then shared with others. Now, was this highly offensive that remains of a family member are shared with people not investigating the accident? Yes, very probably likely. Would someone have knowledge of that? Sure, or they would have disregarded it, as it seems they did here, by sharing the information outside of their individual units, and sharing it beyond what would be considered a legitimate concern. Now, defendants did put forth an argument that there was a legitimate concern, then sharing these images would help them in preventing future accidents. However, the extent of the sharing of the images really contradicts that argument, because it was unnecessary to share these images outside the departments or during video games in order to properly prepare anyone for these future accidents or investigations. So there was this offensive conduct that ultimately harmed the plaintiffs here. Ms. Bryant, Mr. Chester, and their families had to deal with the fact that there were images of their family members' remains out there being used by these county employees leisurely, and it seems like just for the fun of having them and sharing with people that they had them. So the jury here found that all of these elements were met, that there was private information, it was shared without a legitimate purpose, it was offensive, and that the defendants knew or should have known it was offensive, and that ultimately these families were harmed by the sharing of those images. So Ms. Bryant was awarded with $16 million in damages, and Mr. Chester $15 million in damages. Another thing to consider here is that while these images can be controlled if they're in the department, Court could certainly issue an injunction or order preventing the release of the photos by the department. If they were shared with individuals outside the department, which it appears that they have been, then there's really no saying when and where these images might come up in the future. And that's part of the reason why Ms. Bryant and Mr. Chester were awarded these damages, because if they do come out later on, then it is additional harm that they have to suffer reliving a tragedy that happened in the past. And not knowing where these images are or who has them is also an ongoing harm. If you think about it, the fact that a close family member of yours who died in a tragedy is documented by these images, and these images are out there in someone's hands and you have no idea who has them, would create an ongoing harm. And so the jury did find for the plaintiffs, and they were awarded damages here, as it looks like they should have been. And the jury got it right. Whether or not there will be appeal is unknown. That was just, still remains to be seen. But today, Ms. Bryant and Mr. Chester celebrated victory, at least on making a point that this type of thing should not happen. And hopefully the verdict here will instill policies across the country preventing such a invasion of privacy in the future. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to my channel. If you would like additional information or content on a certain subject matter, feel free to comment below and we will do our best to accommodate you.